I would like to go on from here to talk about an essay you wrote in 2000 called The Cult of Authenticity. You wrote this essay for the Boston Review, and for those who haven't read the essay, basically it was an essay in which you defended various allegations that were being put forth at that time by academics and literary critics on Indo-Anglian writers. And the main premise of these allegations was that their writing was inauthentic in some way. And of course, you put your own point forward very well, I might add. To go on from there on a tangent, today, one doesn't hear so much that kind of rhetoric. One imagines most of the people are very okay with reading about a typical Indian situation in English.
Right.
However, for some reason, when it comes to a depiction of that Indian situation on screen, there is still quite a bit of uproar. The English version of Slumdog Millionaire would be a good example. Why this dichotomy, do you think?
Well, I think partly it's a function of the way that the two mediums work, right? So that in text you understand right away that what you're doing is a representation, right?
Right.
So that we all live, especially in this city, in a multilingual world, right? And so if you walk out on the street, you'll hear Gujarati and Punjabi and Marathi and English by the time you reach the next block, right? So if you're writing a novel about this, and it doesn't matter whether you're writing the novel in Hindi or you're writing it in English, you have to find some way within your text of representing that, right?
Right.
And so even if you read a Hindi novel about the city, you'll see that the same kind of stuff is happening. That there are times when characters are speaking and you by context know that they're supposed to be speaking Marathi, but it's in Hindi, right? And we accept that and we're completely comfortable with it, and it doesn't take us out of the sort of engagement, right? Out of being inside the dream of the text, right? I think in film, partly because it's more seemingly physical, right? So that you have sound, you have vision, you have movement. There's more of an expectation of a kind of straightforward mimetic kind of faithfulness, right? If somebody is speaking Hindi, then they should speak Hindi, right? And it becomes more difficult the closer it is to you, the closer the landscape being represented to you, right? So if I'm, watching a movie set in Russia in the 19th century, and Keira Knightley is speaking English, somehow I'm able to make the leap, oh, she's actually speaking Russian, but okay, I'm watching it in English, it's okay. But if the closer you bring it to your own landscape, somehow it becomes more difficult, right? Why is this Punjabi guy speaking in English, right? It doesn't quite make sense to me. So I think the distance of the representation, the nature of the medium itself, and then also we are still used to this idea that visual Indian mediums are going to speak these particular languages, right? Like so Hindi, Telugu, Tamil, we watch these movies and they seem kind of authentic to us, right? Authentic or at least believable, right? We accept them. But I think we're still not used to the sort of role of English as being one of those one of those languages that is acceptable in a visual medium, right? As a representation of everyday life. But I think inevitably we'll get there, right? And what I mean by that is that one of the really amazing things to watch over the last decade in Indian publishing, in print publishing, is the growth of the popular, the genre fiction, right? Because it was a weird upside down kind of growth, right? That the early sort of Indian boom in English writing was all in literary fiction, right? And there was no thriller, there was no rom-com. And then you walk into Landmark now and you'll see acres of these. And I think it's a very healthy kind of thing that's happening. And what that also indicates is that fictions in English about our own landscapes are being read at a much wider level, right? And at a much more sort of, I'm not just meaning in terms of class, but also geographically, right? So the very small town in the middle of nowhere, there'll be a kid there reading a thriller, right? Set in English. So I think as we get more used to that, and it'll become much more acceptable that you have visual representations of of somebody who's in a particular part of the country being represented as speaking in English. And I mean, to some extent, if the most dominant cinema has been Hindi cinema, right? And in Hindi cinema, you already see this happening, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, you'll go to the south and there'll be a Tamil guy, but he'll speak mostly in Hindi with a few turns and twists thrown in here and there, right? And we somehow buy that,
right?
It's okay. I can't remember the last time I've seen subtitles used in an Indian film from another Indian language. Right? We all do this thing,
right? Yeah. Do you see that as a challenge when it comes to adapting Sacred Games in the visual medium, in language, in English? Do you see that as a challenge, and what do you feel is one of the best ways to overcome that challenge?
I'm saying all this, but I'm equally, what is the word? I'm equally participant in this. When I'm watching a sort of crime Indian show, there's some desire in me to see it represented in the actual sort of multilinguality of the city, right? So suppose we had some ideal world in which we could make television which would be speaking 5 languages at the same time,
sure,
right? In a Mumbai kind of way. Sure. But even in the world we live in now, you can't even do that. They will tell you Hindi mein likho, Hindi mein karo, because that's the national audience, right? So I know that's not going to happen. So I think for me, ideally might be a sort of doubleness, right? A bilingual sort of thing.
Right.
I don't know how that would be done exactly, whether you would take 2 shots for every shot or whether you would use dubs,
Right.
But so that somebody who doesn't understand English in India has an opportunity to get to it in Hindi, but again, it's an industry, right? And all of this is like outside of my control, and I've signed on the dotted line, so now I'm in the thing. But ideally that would happen, and I think in some sense it would make economic sense also, right? For whoever's producing it. I mean, the monies that are now present in the mass Indian audience on television are just mind-boggling. Right. I mean, it's like the numbers are
something else
astonishing.
Altogether.